Welcome everyone to this special edition of Coffee and UFOs for Pride Month. I have some really wonderful guests coming up in just a moment. And I'm getting feedback live, and this is why. Did anyone else hear that? The feedback? No? Okay,
No.
That was just me. So we're going to bring on Cheryl, Linda, Costa, Shane McClelland, and Lori Gum in just a moment. And Coffee and UFOs is a platform designed to be a little bit different, more free form, more relaxed, less formulaic than Paranormal Now. So for this episode, we will be covering the history of LGBTQ people and rights, and we'll be tying that all in because all of my guests tonight are paranormal researchers. So let's get to it. If you like today's content, please like, subscribe, comment down below, and of course, you can find the video interview on youtube.com/paranormalpop. All right, here we are. Round table number, I don't know. Welcome everyone, Lori, Shane, Cheryl, and Linda. So let's go around really quick and introduce yourselves. Let's start with Cheryl and Linda. Tell us a little bit about yourself and the paranormal research you do.
I'm Cheryl Costa. I'm a UFO researcher, also been deep in the paranormal for a long time. Lived years in a Buddhist monastery, been studying the esoteric. I was a Wicca priestess for 40 years, so it had both my feet dipped in it, as they say. Linda?
I'm Linda Costa. I've been a science librarian for many years. I act as the publisher and the editor for the book and sort of reel Cheryl back when necessary. And that's our book. We made it pink because women in ufology have been ignored, and we wanted to make sure that everybody knew that this was a book made by women, and it's dedicated to Coral Lorenz, who founded a lot of the UFO research, and who she's been biographied. It's like, oh well, her husband started it. No, she started it, and we wanted to make sure she had credit.
Yeah, thank you for that, Shane.
Yeah, I'm Shane. I'm an attorney here in Columbus, Ohio, and the co-host of the Q Files podcast, along with Lori. And I don't know, we kind of both enjoy researching everything that's sort of weird. We started a few years ago, really kind of doing it publicly with queer ghost hunters, and it has grown from there.
All right, Lori.
What Shane said. Right now, I'm actually a development director for the Parkinson's Foundation. I do that in my day life. But Shane and I met several years ago, more than several now. We were both working at the LGBTQ community center here in Columbus, Stonewall, Columbus. And that's actually where we started Queer Ghost Hunters as a community program initially that went on to be the video and then on YouTube. And then we weren't happy with just researching ghosts. We wanted to research everything and explore everything that's weird. And that's how we came up with the Q Files.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the history of LGBTQ rights. But this is a really important month to honor that, to celebrate that, and talk about changes that we can make to improve either the law or just the treatment of people. So let's go pre-America. Does anyone have any comments on how the world at large looked at people who were not, cisgender straight?
I'll go first, and then anyone can either tell me I'm wrong or add on. So it really kind of depended on where you were in the world. A lot of civilizations were more open to what we now call LGBTQ people, and it really wasn't until the rise of kind of like organized religion, and then even then it's really more like into the 1800s and early 1900s that we start seeing kind of things like laws being passed that say you can't it's specifically really you couldn't be gay. They didn't really care too much about the other stuff, or there wasn't words for it, so they couldn't legislate against it. So I guess that's kind of like the broad answer. Does anyone else want to speak specifically on something?
Sure.
When Cortez's conquistadors came here, they found a third gender functioning within the Native American tribes. And back in Europe, they were having the Spanish Inquisition. So people like them, the only word they had was sodomite. In fact, the anthropologist term they had was burdash, which came from a Persian term called bardash. Bardash meant submissive kept boy. The French version of the word burdash meant submissive male whore. And in the context of the conquistadors, they got here and saw this third gender functioning very nicely in these Native American tribes. And the only model they had was homosexual. And in terms of the Inquisition, they put them to death. They burned them, they drowned them, they fed them to wild dogs. And the Wintes, the Wintes is a Lakota term, but these two souls persons, they didn't have, every tribe had a different name for them. Mm-hmm. And basically the bottom line was, they also noticed that if they killed these kinds of people off when they first encountered a tribe, they found that it demoralized the tribe and it was easier to conquer them. Okay, because they were part of the spiritual heart of the community.
Right. Yeah. So another way to look at that would be either two spirit. That's a term that I've become familiar with.
That's the modern term for it. Yeah.
Yeah, and the Navajo had a term called Nadli, which loosely translates to two spirit, and there is a myth where there's a division in the tribe, and this is in the documentary, Cheryl, you probably remember it. There's a division in the tribe, and the men go to one side of a river, the women go to another side of the river, and they're all trying to do each other's tasks separately, and they're really struggling because they don't know exactly what they're doing. And it's the Nadli that form the bridge. The Nadli being two spirit people that can perform the tasks of the other gender or perform the task of that gender, right? Kind of breaking this dichotomy. And the moral of the story is that we all play a role and we bridge each other together as a society. So if you are different, then you offer something unique to the tribe, to the community. And I think it's a very profound story. And I think if you grow up with that story, then how can you possibly be prejudiced, right?
Well, in the Zuni tribe, it's called a Lumnaha. And what's interesting about it, most famous one that was from the Zuni tribe was a male, female person. It was called Wewa. And all the pictures that were taken by the Smithsonian of that Zuni tribe, the women would be on one side of the posing the picture, the men would be on the other side, and Wewa was right in the middle as a bridge between the genders.
And Wewa, it was an important historical figure, right?
Yes, very much so.
Yeah. And is that the same person who the tribe respected them so much that that just collectively they were able to save Wewa from persecution? Is that how that breaks down?
Actually, Wewa got sent to Washington to represent the tribe.
Yeah.
And she met with many high officials. And I do apologize for the lighting. It's the sun. And she got to represent the tribe in Washington, D.C. And she, even society people had her participate in a local play, that type of thing. But Smithsonian took a ton of pictures. If you Google Wewa, W-E-H-A, you'll see a ton of pictures of Wewa.
Are you guys okay? Are you being blinded by the light right now?
No, we're all right. It's just that, like it says, the sunset is setting over Canada, and it's in our eyes. So
yeah, and I know we're probably feeling similarly because it's like 90 degrees here, and the AC is not on right now. And I know you guys are baking too. So thank you so much for doing this. For anyone who's joining now, we're talking about the diversity of life itself, which is a fascinating part of all fields of study, including that of paranormal. And everyone here has a unique perspective on the approach of the paranormal. And I want to ask all of you, in your experience podcasting, writing, presenting, Linda, you'd mentioned earlier that women in general don't have as much representation as you would like to see. I know Kathleen Martin had mentioned that, especially in the 90s when she started.
Yeah.
And Stanton Frieden was aware of that as well. They had conversations regarding this issue.
Can I add something to that, Alan, real
Sure.
quick? If we go back to what Shane was talking about with the laws that were being passed in the 1800s and 1900s, they usually weren't even for lesbians. They were for gay men, because lesbians were so invisible that there weren't actually any laws against them. It was about sodomy, and that's what the laws, that's how they put homosexuals in jail. But like I said, lesbians weren't even visible enough to be criminals at that point.
There was the phenomena of Boston marriages where two women would live together, and usually everybody assumed that, they're just really close friends, which they probably were more than close friends, but that was still considered sort of respectable. In fact, I grew up with two women living next door together, and I had no idea they were lesbians. My parents says, they're sisters, but they don't look anything alike.
Yeah.
But they minded their business and didn't bother me, and so.
But it's amazing because even that tolerance desexualized lesbians.
Yes.
It was the
Yeah.
actual desexualization that made them not dangerous to the white men who were making the laws.
Right.
Right. So the desexualization, where are we now with that in today? Is that how pervasive is that as an issue?
Well, once you hit middle age, every woman is invisible. So,
Well, it depends what you're talking. You're talking about women. You're talking about lesbians. You're talking about transgender people. There's a lot of different invisibilities. There really are.
Well, I know it's only when I'm middle-aged women. It's like, teenagers will walk right straight through you in the mall.
Right.
They just don't see you.
I'm with you there. We're right the same age. I talk about feeling like a ghost sometimes. You absolutely do. But that's a benefit too. Then you can slip by and do a lot of things and
It's a
nobody notices.
superpower. Yeah, it is.
Superpower. That's right. That's right.
Well, I think there's something that keeps coming up lately. Maybe I'm supposed to learn something, but there's something about getting older where you start caring less and less about what other people say and think and that sort of thing, and there is it's fulfilling to feel more empowered as you get older. Here's a comment from Kathy. I can sympathize with Cheryl and Linda. If we didn't have all our trees, we'd be blinded by the sunset.
And my wife is driving me crazy with her hands.
Oh, you two are plugged in together into the same
and
earpiece.
she forgets. She's used to being a solo act, so.
Well, that's true. But we need to get you on Paranormal Now more, Linda. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay,
we
good,
can hear
good.
you.
Just want to make sure. All right. So let's move forward a little bit to more modern times. When do you think the shift started, where society at large began to accept LGBTQ people in America?
Last year.
Yeah.
Yeah. From my perspective, I was 16 years old, watching I live in upstate New York, and I did as a kid, and I was 16 years old. My parents had gone to play cards with some neighbors, and I was watching the 10 o'clock news out of New York City, WNEW, Metro Television, and they were showing footage from the day after the Stonewall riot.
Yeah.
And on the edge, I hadn't owned up to anybody what was going on inside me. Okay. And I saw these queens, big platform heels, hair up to here, made up like you wouldn't believe, standing on the edge of the police line, jeering at the cops. Okay. This is the day after the riot. Okay. And my only remark was, go get them, girls. So my heart was with them. Okay. and it would be another 20 years before I could do anything about it. And when I started doing I started becoming an activist.
Yeah.
And I think the anniversary of the Stonewall riot is 52 years ago today, I believe, right, Shane?
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
52 years
51
ago
or-
today.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Stonewall was really the major turning point.
I don't think Stonewall was the major turning point.
wasn't.
Stonewall just threw the first rock in the puddle and started to get the waves going out. It was really, I lived in New York City during this time.
Mhm.
It was the AIDS crisis. I know this is probably obvious history to a lot of people, but I went to New York City in 1980. I was an out lesbian at that time, and I lived through the AIDS crisis. And what happened during the AIDS crisis is that it became really unacceptable in the queer community to remain in the closet anymore because we were dying. Okay. So it really became an immoral community imperative to come out. And by coming out, what happened was within 20 years, then everyone started to know somebody gay, a daughter, a husband, a wife. And once you know someone, it changes everything. So Stonewall threw the first rock. The AIDS tragedy brought this awareness, and then even more than the awareness of queer people, because it was actually horrible at the time. People were afraid to be around you, especially men in particular, gay men. You were contagious. But the fact that it opened up and made everybody come out and act up, it made activists of all of us, particularly in New York City. And 20 years later, we would see that culmination in, Bergefell, v. Hodges with the marriage Supreme Court. And I'll say it again, what made that possible, unfortunately, and if I could go back, I'd change it. But what made that possible was the AIDS, the horrific AIDS tragedy. I believe that with all my heart.
I would agree. Because prior to the AIDS crisis, it was hard to even plug into any kind of gay groups. Okay. And unfortunately, a lot of gay groups were mostly men, and they didn't want to have anything to do with anything that looked like the cross dressers, at least where I was. But what was interesting was that with the AIDS hysteria, I was a very talented makeup artist back in the 80s, and I had my corporate job, but I like to I worked with theatrical makeup, was trained in that sort of thing. So I tried to get a position with one of the major, this is in the DC area, one of the major department stores. You pick a name, they were all there. And every one of them turned me down. Finally, one of them flat told me, I said, why is everyone turning me down? I'm really talented at this stuff. She says, honey, and remember, I hadn't transitioned yet. Honey, they're afraid you have AIDS and nobody wants you to touch them. Okay. And then finally, I was doing this stuff part-time over at a place called Cosmetic Center in the DC regional area. And they were kind of a chain for cosmetics, essentially what I'm going to call gray product. And I started doing some makeovers there, and the word got around that I did great work, and I had a booking every day. When I came home from my corporate job and went over there, I had a full book. And these two ladies came in one day. It turned out they were vice presidents for Lancome, and they picked me up. And they liked my work, and they liked my presentation of how I taught. And that basically, they got over this idea of you don't have to you don't have AIDS, you're not going to touch somebody. And they dealt well with the uniform. I wouldn't wear their little suit, the boy suit. So they gave me the ascot jacket the women wore. Okay. And the only real rule was after you change, you got to wear the skirt. I said, no problem. So.
Yeah. So unfortunately, it seems like then it was a tragedy on a massive scale that helped to turn the tide of awareness. So I'm going to talk a little bit about entertainment and representation in entertainment. Quick question: does anybody here watch Pose?
I have.
Yeah.
You do? Lori, no? Okay.
No, I don't. You won't be quizzing me on TV shows, so I'll sit that one out. Yeah.
All right. Well, my wife and I, we love Pose, and I'm really upset they're not going to do a season 4. But whatever, apparently there's nothing we can do about that. But when you compare a show like Pose to actual history, there is that people have revisionist histories for themselves. Was there that much of a division at times between lesbian, gay, transgender?
Oh yeah, big time.
We could talk for 4 hours about that. We could just talk from 1987 to 1992 and fill 10 books. I mean, seriously.
Easy.
Yeah. I mean, just with I participated in a lot of the ACT UP. I didn't join ACT UP.
Mm-hmm.
Actually left ACT UP exactly because of that, because of the divisions and the politics and all that kind of stuff. It was brutal stuff. It really was within our own community. Take Larry Kramer. Larry Kramer is a perfect example. I always love to say about Larry Kramer, he was an asshole, but he was our asshole, which was really the best way to describe Larry. But Larry was always at the center of that, and there were great divisions, and I think ultimately it made the community stronger, but it was in New York City. It was very difficult if you didn't want to be sort of in that sort of toxic mess all the time. It was very difficult.
Yeah.
In the late, how do we want to say this? In the early 90s, the transgender communities really started having a voice. They weren't just a few isolated clubs here and there. They were starting to really, really make some headway. And I had been one of the original board members of the International Foundation for Gender Education. I got outed back in the mid 80s, and suddenly I had a license to go on national television because I didn't get fired over it. And what else could they do to me? Okay. Yeah. In fact, that outness saved my government security clearance. I had a government agent. They were revamping my security clearance in the 87 time frame. I was mid transition. I was still going to work with the white shirt and tie, but my eyebrows were getting thin, and I had pierced ears and that type of thing, frizzy hair. And the guy says, well, I'm going to turn off your clearance because I think you can be blackmailed. And this was not an uncommon problem with people with clearances. You'd go down, anybody else would go down there and get interviewed for a clearance, and it was a 45-minute, maybe an hour presentation. If you were gay and you were open about it, you got the 7-hour hostile interrogation. It was nasty. Well, he told me he was going to turn off my clearance because I was too discreet and he felt I could be blackmailed. I said, I can fix that. I came back 3 weeks later when he came back, and I threw a VHS tape on the desk, and I said, I'm the redhead on Gary Collins magazine. I'm the blonde on Phil Donahue. The guy about dropped his teeth. And he said, you came out on national television? I said, can't be blackmailed. Oh, and I made VHS copies for everybody in the office and passed them out. They took them home and played them to their wives.
That's great.
That shut the whole problem down.
Yeah.
And amazingly enough, that division of the government that did the investigations ended up hiring me as a consultant for whenever they dealt with a cross-dresser or a trans person.
Now, see, I'm not going to say this as an encouragement, because there are a lot of people out there in very vulnerable and volatile situations. But there is something to be said. It seems like there's a parallel on a larger scale, Lori, with what you were saying, with being forced to come out as a community. And Cheryl, in her own personal life, being pushed to come out, and it was in a sense kind of a positive thing. Is that a theme that is consistent to today? Do we hear that with younger people where they're forced to come out and it turns out to be positive?
I think it's I don't hear of a lot of people being forced to come out. And even talking about the age year, I wasn't talking about people being forced out. I was talking about it being morally unacceptable in the community to stay in the closet, so people would, but they weren't outed. I mean, there were outing, programs, even with ACT UP, where they would hang up pictures of, celebrities and try to out them. But I think our community here in Columbus in particular, and we've had our own battles over here the last, Shane and I were at the heart of them here in the last 4 or 5 years. really with our established LGBTQ community, the A-list gays, as you would say, and the transgender community, and particularly transgender people of color. There are still those divisions, and we're fighting it even now. Like I said, Shane and I have been at the center of this, and it's starting to change. We've seen an amazing change in leadership in the queer organizations in Columbus because of this. So we have a lot of people of color, particularly African Americans, running a lot of these groups as executive directors. So there has been progress. But one of the things I want to go back to, you were talking about, the government and blackmail. That they were always worried if you were gay, you could be blackmailed. And you go back to McCarthyism and all of that. There was many homosexuals kicked out of their jobs as there were communists.
Yes.
As a matter of fact, it was very much a veiled government, conspiracy to get rid of Jews and gays, as much as it was communist. So, there has been this government persecution, very much so. And they always said, well, the reason they kick you out is because you could be blackmailed. That was always the reason that they could, the Russians find out and they're gonna, blackmail you. They'll find out you're gay. It was preposterous, all the reasons. But I know that was kind of around the a lot of different subjects there in my comment, but
no, I really appreciate this.
It's dead on the mark. It really is.
Yeah. See, that's why these conversations are really important, because I'm your straight white guy, right? I'm passionate about the rights of LGBTQ people, and yet, there's so much that I don't know, and it's important to continually have these conversations so we can all evolve together. So, so in that vein, let's start with Shane. How do you self-identify?
I'm just a plain old gay man.
A plain old gay man. What is that? And what does that mean?
A POGM. A POGM. That's what he is.
Hashtag. Yeah.
No. So Lori and I actually do this a lot when we're investigating. We introduce ourselves like, so I, gay means I'm a man who loves other men. And we do that in our investigations just to kind of clear up the language, because a lot of these words are modern inventions. Yeah. So when we're, investigating or even, when we've done presentations and stuff, it's just a way to like further connect and explain exactly kind of like what queer entails, which is a variety under the rainbow.
A variety under the rainbow. And that's
beautiful.
It's beautiful. No, it really is.
The mark.
Yeah, no, it
does. That's exactly right. Yeah.
And hence the flag, I suppose. Now the flag originally had, I think, like 8 colors, and now it's 6 colors. Does anybody know?
It's got more now.
Yeah.
Oh, no, you're right. Even the Human Rights Campaign, I just got that text message. They voted on the new flag with black, brown,
right.
So I think 2 other colors now they've added to that. Yeah.
Pink and blue too. Yeah.
Pink and blue. Okay. And so Svete, love of my life.
Yes.
Just brought this piece.
That's great. I saw that. That's fantastic.
Yeah, everyone is awesome.
You want to talk about progress. We've made it to Legos, for God's sake.
We have. And Oreos, they're doing that UFO thing. Did you see that? Because of the UAP task force report coming out, I guess. So they did this thing. They created a special limited edition pack, and you're supposed to put a Oreo on this crop circle in the middle, and it's supposed to make contact. Anyway, you don't actually make contact, but it was cute.
That's brilliant. Good job.
But yeah, this is keeping with the zeitgeist for sure. And like that's the whole point, right? That even now, I suspect that all of us talking today, in 20 years from now, there's going to be new terminology. There's going to be ideas that maybe we haven't even thought of yet. And I think that's what's fun and exciting about this. You're right. With when I grew up, it wasn't transgender, it was transsexual, which was really, it's a misnomer. I mean, it was so vague. I remember we were watching a documentary on Netflix, and they were criticizing pop culture, movies, film, and representation. And they were highlighting films or TV shows like Twin Peaks. I don't know if you remember X-Files. David Duchovny played a cross-dresser, and clearly David Lynch, who was directing this, I mean, it was very progressive at the time, very progressive. But looking at it now, kind of there was blind spots, you know, that he missed in representing this type of person. But my defense of someone like that in that time period was that it was really quite bold, and it was with I think love in the heart. I think it was coming from the right place. And there were a couple of comments built into the script that I was like, you know, that doesn't hold up anymore. It was supposed to be for comedy. But it was the first time I think on national television you had a character, not only that, a FBI agent. This is before the X-Files, you know, playing a accepted, you know, transsexual person, and that I think was a beautiful thing. But I feel like a lot of the younger generation now like looks back on those things and say we were horrible people for the way we represented, which is
and some.
In some cases, it's true.
You take a film like, you know, one of my favorite films, you take a film like Silence of the Lambs that has this amazing female. When have you ever seen a female rescue a female on film? But then you have this character that's not really but for the main public, they can take this as a transgender person, or as you say, a transsexual, and it gets all convoluted and that representation of that. So, you know, obviously Jonathan Demme's a director with great integrity and empathy. One just sort of wishes that he may have looked at that character in a different lens, in some way, because I think that kind of mars the film in a bit. But so it depends. I can look back to some things and say, you know, I can look back to The Children's Hour with Audrey Hepburn and I think it's Audrey Hepburn and Shirley MacLaine, and it's horrific. You know, I mean, even Lillian Hellman, the play's horrible. She hangs herself at the end. You know, it was only about 10 years ago that we stopped killing ourselves on screen. I mean, seriously. I mean, for God's sake, I mean, you go through what's my pet peeve forever. It was, you know, Harvey Milk. Okay. Sean Penn. So another straight. So here's what I felt like, you know, a bunch of dead queers so that, you know, white cisgender actors could get Oscars, you know, from Harvey Milk to Boys Don't Cry, you know, a Brandon Tina story. It was just like, so everybody saw that as progress, but I just cringed a lot of the time. I really did. So I think, you know, like, oh, Children's Hour, finally they represented lesbian. It was horrible. It was horrible. So it really depends upon that representation, as to whether or not it was true progress or someone who had their heart was in the right place or not, because there was plenty of portrayals where the heart wasn't in the right place and it was sensational, and you know, it was used for that reason. So I agree with you, but it does depend upon the specific case of the film or the book or whatever.
Yeah, and we don't see as many stereotypical interior designer gay men in film, but now we actually see you know, designer gay men on reality shows doing things, you know, which is that's 1,000 times better than someone else, a straight guy like you said, playing one. But you know, on occasion, do you think it's a fair argument to say, as a director, I'm choosing the best actor for the role, or do you really think that they should just like focus 100% on finding a lesbian or gay person, or you know?
Well, at least try. You know, just at least try. If you can't find a queer actor, you tried. Tell everybody you tried, and then you cast Sean Penn. Okay, at least tell me you tried. You reached out there and you tried. I just, like I said, and again, it really was for about 10 years, just stories about the murder of queer people. I mean, it was queer people that got murdered, and those were all the Oscar winning, you know, or monster, you know, Charlize Theron, you know, whatever. Yeah, it was just, you know, we're just Oscar fodder, and that's what it felt like for a long time.
Yeah.
And it's nice when you finally get queer directors, you know, that's the same thing as getting, you know, now it's, you know, when you take something, I just saw, you know, Underground Railroad on Netflix, which I love. It was my favorite book the last 10 years amazing. And, you know, with Barry Jenkins, it shouldn't have been anybody but an African-American director, you know, directing that. And that's what I'm saying. Why I think we'll get to the point when there's queer stories. Like, it's not that somebody can't, but again, it's the lens relationships, and you portray this. And I think it's really becoming more and more important to have that lens of that director or that writer or whatever be the same lens as the character.
Yeah, I mean, like I was saying about myself, right? I'm not gay or queer or transgender, right? So how do I know what it's like to be, in that person's state of mind in their body? And if I wanted to create a work of art or a film,
it probably
I bet it probably wouldn't be very good if it's coming out of here, right? Yeah. So you better hire a writer,
at least try.
That experience.
Right.
Or something. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I get it.
Exactly. And it's the same thing for women. I mean, it's like how many years, centuries and centuries and centuries of, men writing stories about women. And it's just like, it's just, I'm just not so interested in hearing, I'm much more, again, interested in hearing from the creator has the same lens as the characters to a certain extent.
My wife and I just rewatched My Fair Lady. Oh, good Lord.
Yeah.
Do I see it with different eyes now?
Yep.
Oh my God. And the whole time I'm watching it, I'm trying to see it through my eyes 30 years ago, right? As a kid.
Yeah.
At the time it was like, she's a strong female character. And now you're looking at it, you're like, oh my God, she just gave into this guy. He's a total dick.
Total twit. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. And like, I get they were doing the cranky humor thing, but it was so much. I was like, man, this is, and my wife hated it because she didn't grow up watching American musicals like I did. So she was like, this is horrible film, a horrible representation for a woman. But I still love the songs, though. They're catchy.
Yeah. I heard that the Broadway play that Lauren Ambrose did, that she changed the ending of it. I don't know what the ending is because they won't tell anybody. They're keeping it secret, but that's been corrected. Yeah.
That's the thing. So in the ending of the film, she walks in and she's kind of like, I understand that you love me, right? That's the sentiment she's projecting. She doesn't actually verbalize, right, that she's back with him or that she accepts that, whatever. But the fact that he lies there in the chair and then he's like, get me my slippers. And it's supposed to be a ha 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 moment. Not at all. It should have been her sitting in the chair saying to him, get me my slippers. And if he would have gotten up and did that, I would have completely changed, I think, the entire film.
Or picked up the slippers and hit him over the damn head with it. That's what she should have done.
There you go.
Yes. Yeah, seriously. Yeah, she can get out there in the world and make it on her own now. She doesn't need it.
Alan, can I interject a point here?
Sure.
Okay, when the TV series Transparent came out, okay?
Yes.
I watched part of the first season, and for the most part, I let Linda watch it, okay? I just did. I got to the point where I was uncomfortable watching it. It was like watching my own life because the character was going through many of the same hoops that I went through, meeting people in adult bookstores, trying to find literature about transness, that type of thing, meeting at these Pocono retreats so you can meet other people. I won Miss Pocono, was 1986 at one of those things, so I started watching it, and I finally told Linda, I said, Linda, I can't watch this anymore. It's pushing too many buttons. It's too much like my own life, and I really can't watch it anymore.
Yeah. Well, Linda, how do you identify?
Well, I have sort of interesting perspective, I guess. I had just divorced my second husband. I had spent my life as a straight woman, and I met, if you don't quit fiddling, I'm going to hit you. Sorry.
Slippers, pick up the slippers. Where's the slippers?
She's ready to pull my earplug out again.
Yeah.
So I met her. I met Tashi after I was divorced at a party, and I remember after I met Tashi, I asked my boyfriend at the time who brought me to the party. He says, "Is Tashi male or female?" And he looks at me and says, "Yes." I says, "Well, that's real helpful." I did find out that she was a nun at the time, and so that's why she had the really short hair, etc. But basically, to make a long story short, I fell in love with the person, and it really, I had never thought about, it from a standpoint of a same sex, or I meant, in fact, because she's trans, a lot of people, especially some straight, gay people, it's like, oh, you're just a straight couple. And so I guess I'm officially bi, which is I've learned is one of the most hated of all the alphabets. Nobody trusts us. Make up your mind, and it's just like, I judge each person as an individual and don't look at their genitals, I guess is what it comes down to.
That always just ticked me off. Because, I'm coming from my perspective, right? And then I'll hear a gay man or a lesbian say, pick a side. I'm like, I don't understand the psychology. Maybe you guys can explain where people are coming from, because there must be a reason for that.
I think it's the same thing as people that are confronted by trans people, and I got ostracized by friends, and and I've had problems at work, etc. Because I tell people I was kicked out of a closet suddenly that I didn't even know I was in, So it was it's been a very fast and furious sort of experience for me, and our few attempts here in Syracuse to interact with the gay community, they basically didn't want much to do with us, except my gay hairdresser, who actually doesn't get along with the other gays in town too. So but it's I'm hoping we're going to be moving to Cleveland. Hopefully if Columbus is good, Cleveland will be good too. And I think it's just that people they like black and white. They can't deal with dichotomy. It's just it's got to be one or the other. And the psychologist in me says that it's that when you're confronted with somebody that you can't figure out, it starts to reflect back on yourself, and you start getting confused. It's like, well, if this person's not making a commitment one way or the other, I mean, you have to be one or the other. And even if you just look at the biology, the spectrum of people's gender and sex, just from a chromosomal standpoint, it's all over the map. There's Kinsey, I think, was the one that says the behavior is it's a wide range. And I think just uncertainty. I mean, we've sort of learned that in our politics too, that people want a certain answer, and they don't want to have to make their own decisions. They don't want to have to learn. They want to stay in their ignorance.
Yeah. And can I add something to that? I think one of the things I always heard, like I said, I lived in New York City for 20 years, 1980 to 2000. What I always heard in the gay community, particularly the lesbian community, about bisexual women, is for some reason there was a resentment that you could pass as straight. So if it all came down and the gay Holocaust happened, you wouldn't get carried away because you could be with your husband. And when things were, and that grew out of a situation being so scary and so desperate, I think during those years, that those resentments came out in that way. I mean, I'll never forget. I heard that many times, and I thought, it's just like, well, they can pass if they want to, and it's just such a kind of warped way of thinking about things within our own community.
Well, I guess there's that sense of, this is already hard enough for me as it is, trying to be open and gay, or open and trans, or open and queer or bi, or whatever it is that individual is trying to be open about. And now I have to deal with people being confused even further. And I'm sure you get questions like, well, what does this mean? What does that mean? It's like you hear people say, well, what is this non-binary stuff? Right? I think it's natural when you first hear something that's new to be like, I don't understand that. But to jump to that place of judgment, I don't know, Shane, do you have to have conversations with people sometimes? And
yeah, I feel like everyone here has probably had those conversations or educational moments. And really, we have to remember that even just the language that most people are comfortable with and familiar with is, give or take 100 years old. And then we have all of these kind of new words, and they're new words, but they're just words that are defining things that have always existed. And through the internet and social media, people are able to realize they're not alone, and connect with others who have either a similar sexuality as them or a similar gender identity, and they realize that maybe it's not very many people, right? But there's other ones like them, and now they call themselves a name, and they create an identity that describes that so other people can find them and connect. And so when people are, I guess upset, I don't really think that's the word that I'm looking for, that there's all these new words and genders and sexualities. It's like they've always existed. We're just calling them what they are now. And we're even seeing, those kind of things like split off and get redefined or further refined in their definition. And I think it's just, admittedly, sometimes it can feel overwhelming when you're like there's people who have a lot of identities, but that's fine. It just, allows them to be very specific with what they are, who they are, and what they're looking for.
I'm a library cataloger, and one of the things I do is classify books. Okay. And one thing you quickly learn is that any one book can be classified and put in many different areas. Very rarely is something just about one thing. And I think people are the same way, that these are all labels. And in fact, that's it's a psychological theory that goes back into the 50s, is that, we would label people crazy, and that would make them crazy because they've been labeled. And so personally, I get irritated by all these labels that people are, well, you can't call them that, you have to call them this. And it's just, I'm just Linda, just leave it at that, Same. I've known this person under at least 2 or 3 different names so far. She changes them occasionally.
But the difference is now. The difference is now is that we're identifying ourselves. Yes, it used to be the straight world labeling us. Now we identify ourselves, and that's a very different situation than it was, deciding what your word would be used for homosexual. So it's really within the community and ourselves as to how we self-identify. Big difference there.
Back in the a lot of people hear the they and them kind of references to people, think it's more of a recent thing. There were people calling me they and them back in 1992 with me. My first exposure to it, I was at a Star Trek convention. I'm in my Starfleet uniform. I'm having dinner with some gay friends.
That's classic.
We're all in our
what a great way
suits.
To start a story. That's fantastic.
And we're all there, and this one guy is kind of like leading the table, and he's talking about something that happened at a previous convention, and every time he points at me, he refers to them. Okay, this is in 92, and finally this lady stopped him and said, "Honey, why are you calling that poor woman them?" He looked at her and he said, "Honey, you watch her for 10 minutes and tell me what to call her." And of course, there's this thing, a lot of trans people cycle.
Yeah.
Okay. And 10 minutes later, she's, "Oh my God, there's 3 of them in there," So.
And the proper response would have been, how does this person want to be identified?
Thank you.
Again, that's the thing now that's very different. Like, instead of those 2 people watching you deciding what you're going to be called, maybe they should have asked you how you identify.
And I said Commander Costa.
There you go. Great. Good for you. Good. So Commander may become like a whole new self-identity. So
there you go.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny. Like if you tell anybody the adage "know thyself," everyone's like, "Yeah, that's great." But as soon as you try to tell them who thyself is, then they get really worked up.
Yeah.
There's an irony there. But identifying who we are is it's like a lifelong thing. Anyone who tells me that they know who they are 100% through and through, they might today, but tomorrow they're going to be a little bit different.
That's right.
Yeah.
We're kind of coming close to the end of the show. One of the things I wanted to mention, we've come a long ways, baby, as they used to say in that cigarette commercial. About 6 years ago, I was doing a presentation up at the college. I was finishing a 40-year-old bachelor's degree. And this lady walked up to me and says, "I know who you are." And I said, and she says, "You started Pride at Lockheed Martin." I said, "Yeah, I did." She says, "Well, we need you." And I said, "What do you mean you need me? The French Foreign Legion or something, And she says, "No." She says, "We have a center in downtown here called the Q Center. It's for kids who are transitioning." I said, "Really?" She says, "Yeah. 8 9 years old to 19 is the age range, with most of them centered around 14, 15. And I said, why do you need me? I'm a dinosaur. You know, what are these kids aren't going to, I've got nothing in common with them. It's just, no, you're a grandparent age. You survived. They need to know that there's life after and that there's good life after. And so I participated there for almost 2 years.
Well, absolutely. Like it here, we have a group, a very fantastic organization here called Kaleidoscope in Columbus, doing the exact same thing. It's been around about 10 years. I mean, they were really the first to advocate for, a transgender youth. And it's just amazing now that there's a place for these kids to go. And it's just fantastic.
Yeah. Is this Columbus, Ohio?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, okay, good. Keep in touch.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I spent the weekend in Cleveland, so there you go.
There you go.
Yeah, I mean, people need, especially younger people, really need that place to go. Still today, I think that's the illusion that entertainment, positive as it is, that there's actual real representation now. The illusion is that we're all good, right? You can come out, no, it's not that easy for a lot of people. Even in the most, liberal-minded centers of the country or the world, you still have a mom or a dad or someone who utterly disapproves. And
there's a great slogan that I think it was the Trevor Project maybe that came up with this. I'm not sure, but we can all, from my age to you and Shane being younger. Here's the thing: we always say it gets better. Hang on, and we're proof that it gets better. We probably all, I know I certainly did as a teenager, a gay teenager in the 70s, thought about suicide. There's just no doubt about it. Luckily, I had fantastic parents and a close family support. I wasn't out to them yet, but I knew what doing that would do to them. And just to say it gets better, like you said, we survived and you can survive too.
We saw a piece in the New York Times, I think it was last weekend. It was written by a parent. She had to do it under a pseudonym, but she was explaining about how much she loves her small child who has come out to her and is in the process of becoming this new gendered person. And all these other people, these support groups, these parents and families have established. And I was in tears because I've been transitioned over 30, almost pushing 35 years now. And my mother still dead names me, so we've come a long ways.
Yeah, we have.
Yeah, it really runs deep. I had experimented with a friend when I was in teenage years, right? But I'm straight. I found out years later was gay, but I had at the time, I didn't know what that was. Like, I didn't understand it in that context. I thought we were just experimenting. But the more important point of that is that he couldn't even verbalize that to me. Like, we're having, these sexual encounters, and he couldn't verbalize it to me. That's how deep the stigma can go. Even with someone that you feel like you can trust, you can't even say it out loud. And that's still going on today. So, we only have a few minutes left. So what do you leave with all the progress? What ideas do you have to help move the conversation forward and to help people not only just accept, but accept themselves?
Well, the reason that Shane and I actually started Queer Ghost Hunters and did it with the director, particularly on YouTube, was to reach young queer people, to tell them the history of this community and to tell them, that it was like we tricked them into learning LGBTQ history because it was a ghost hunt show. And that was one of the primary things. Shane and I have always been about history. Yeah. And we'd have like 13-year-olds, commenting from Finland, I think, right, Shane, or something.
It was around the world, but the what I remember the most was they were like 13 or 14, but they were from some small town in Nebraska, and they wrote us this huge email just talking about how nice it was to see people like them. And it was like, I mean, it's not, I don't know, it makes you feel really good, but it makes you really, really sad that this person, is alone except for YouTube.
Yeah, and we had, transgender individuals on the show. We all had, when the little introduction ran, there were all of our identities. I was gender non-confirming lesbian, and there was a demi-romantic trans man, and people were like, oh, and there was a pansexual femme. What was Victoria? Pansexual femme, gender fluid pansexual femme. And we got these letters like, I finally see myself on screen. I finally see myself on screen. Yeah, it was amazing. I mean, and that was our primary reason for doing that series.
On the paranormal side, I think I interviewed Shane on my witchcraft radio program.
Oh, maybe we did do that
years ago. Yeah,
I know I recognize your name, but yeah.
But see, isn't that interesting? So, queer ghost hunting, right, was on YouTube. Kestryl and Company that Cheryl was involved with was a Wiccan program on cable television,
cable access
television, and Cheryl herself was the representation, right? And it was through Wiccanism, which is just like, it's so cool to think in those terms. And what year was that, Cheryl?
91 through 92.
It's just astounding. Wow. So that was happening then, and then what it was like the mid. What year was it? You guys started
2015.
2015. Yeah, and the work is still happening, and you're all doing that with alternative programming, which is just so cool. You're not the Will and Graces out there, and that's a beautiful thing. I love that.
And it's funny, we still had to explain it. So the show was actually called Queer Ghost Hunters Hunting Queer Ghosts. Just so everybody was clear, because we didn't want to just say queer ghost hunters. Well, yeah. And people would be like, okay, what are you
like, what are you doing? What are you looking for?
Like, it's in the title. It's in the title. It's in the title.
Well, and what happens if you find a ghost that's not queer?
Oh, well, they usually are, just so you know. But because they talk to us, we talked about it. Here's the number one best way to reach a ghost: shared experience, period. If a ghost has the same kind of shared experience as you do, chances are they're going to talk to you. And you know what? Just like you find queer people everywhere, you find queer ghosts everywhere. And we didn't expect to, and we did. We were shocked. We were shocked.
The afterlife is like real life in that you're attracted to kindred spirits, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So that actually makes sense. In a sense, I remember you and Shane talking about this. You're like magnets.
Well, he's the real magnet. I call him ghost bait all the time. I mean, we just put him in a room, and if he tingles, we stay in that room. But yeah, and again, it's just like anything. Why would a queer ghost talk to any of those ghost hunters that bang down the door and threaten? Why would any queer ghost talk to any of those ghost hunters?
It's a good point, especially if the reason that they are still hanging around has to do with the nature of their experience as a queer person.
Correct.
Yeah. Correct. And then Ryan Spreck from Somewhere in the Sky says, "Happy Pride to all of you. We need a Q-Files TV show reboot."
Hey, we're ready. We're ready.
Yeah, it's funny because before tonight's show, I went to your channel. It's been like 2 years since you guys posted anything on YouTube.
40 episodes, Alan. 40 episodes since. Yeah.
Wow.
So what do you think? Does the future again?
We're ready. Season 3. Well, we got a doozy plan. We just booked the first episode of season 3, and it's a doozy. Oh. You want to talk about the ultimate paranormal ghost queer story ever? Well, we're covering it.
Okay. That's a good tease. And I'm always telling Cheryl too, like we want to see her out there, on TV, on YouTube, doing something. I think we need a Cheryl and Linda Costa program. That's what we need, especially with the movement of the UAP. And we were talking about this with the UAP analysis, the task force analysis. We need more analytical minds out there, and the two of you have done the best work as far as breaking down that data than anyone else, better than anyone else.
I would listen to that every episode, no joke.
Honest to goodness, because I think there's that material we're on a roll now. It's just going to keep coming. I think that Pandora's box has been opened just enough, and it'll be years of just new cases to be studied and released by the task force. So, and hopefully a lot more data, because they're collecting from all these different agencies now, and military branches. So I think that there'll be so much more to analyze. Cheryl, can you make a phone call and get in on that?
Actually, I spent the afternoon preparing material for the Senate Select Committee. So,
Excellent.
This is what, yeah, exactly. Or Linda, are you tired of the data analysis?
No, it's not that so much as that we've been approached by TV producers, et cetera, for the last 2 or 3 years, and they don't want an old gay trans couple. I'm at the one show, they were looking for an extra person, and we introduced a MUFON friend of ours, and it's like, oh, we're going to center the show around him because he was a male detective. They don't want queer women. They certainly want old women like us.
See, there you go. It's still right now, Alan, what we
Still
started out
happening.
from the beginning. It's still happening. Absolutely.
Yeah, that and there's so many other stereotypes that they just don't want to put out there. I mean, other than the Ghost brothers, like I don't see very much African American representation.
Absolutely. And we
out there
talked
at
about
all.
that at length.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, we wanted to actually, we haven't gotten around to it, but we wanted to present we have an Ohio Historical Society here. It's a, it's your kind of stodgy history, state organization. And we wanted to pitch to them like sort of heritage ghost hunting, like you go down to German village, and if German people want to, you do African American. You could do Asian. You could do, especially in Cincinnati with all the Underground Railroad, and in Columbus there's so many Underground Railroad, to have those led by African Americans. This idea that people could actually go on their own heritage ghost hunts, which could be really fun, and finding about your own local heritage and your own local heritage history. I think it'd be great.
Yeah. All right. So let's leave some final thoughts. We'll start with Shane.
I don't even know what final thoughts.
Whatever you want. Just before we sign off.
I guess just I wish everyone a happy Pride, and thanks for having us on, Alan.
Okay. Thanks, Shane. Happy Pride. Lori. Yeah.
It just blacked out on me. I lost the audio there for a minute.
Final thought you want to leave us with?
Yeah, I just think I love, shows like this that these issues get to be brought to the mainstream. So I appreciate that. We can't get enough of that. And just all the paranormal, investigators out there, don't assume the race, gender, sexuality, heritage of any of the entities that you come upon, because, you're cutting out so many possible entities that you could be interacting with. So, keep an open mind when you're doing any kind of paranormal investigating.
Great. All right. The Q Files podcast. And Cheryl.
Well, okay. Let's see if we can break another one of those glass ceilings for queer people. If this whole Linda and I have done the only UFO statistics since 1968, and even Project Blue Book didn't do it like we've done it. Mm-hmm. And there's a possibility out there that when they hold congressional hearings, we're the only game in town when it comes to UFO statistics. So you may see a trans lady and a bi lady up there testifying before Congress with a nice big pink book.
Yeah.
That would make my year. I'm not joking. Not just my Pride Month, but my whole year.
And Linda.
Well, I'm going to be the librarian and say, just as people try to understand you shouldn't judge a book by its cover, I wish we would stop judging human minds by the cover of the flesh that's on them.
All right, beautiful.
It's long past that time.
Indeed, yeah. So we have a lot of work to do, but we have come a long way. And I do want to add that for these, producers out there, I think we have all seen, and that the shows that do well aren't necessarily the pop star looking or the celebrity. Yeah. Right? Because the people who are interested in these subjects, they like unique.
For sure.
Authentic.
People who are authentic and unique.
True.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. And unfortunately, they don't get that because those are the shows that do the best. But all right. So peace and love to everyone out there. Happy Pride Month. And that's it for the special edition of Coffee and UFOs. On Twitter, not X-Files, Q-Files, right?
Right.
Yeah. Yes.
Q-Files. You can follow me at paranormal_now. And Cheryl, where do you want people to go?
Go to Amazon, go to books, search Cheryl Costa, and you'll find what we've got.
Okay.
Excellent.
That's it. Happy Coffee UFOs Pride Day.